911, what's your emergency?
Greetings and welcome to my workshop about demystifying EMTB or EMT basic training. In this first video, we'll be doing just a basic introduction of what this workshop will be and also a little bit about my background. The second video will be covering the medical, legal, and ethical responsibilities of the EMT. Basically stated of general rules, practices, principles, and things of that nature. I want to get it done out of the way up front. That way we can move on to the more interesting topics, like CPR and patient assessment and scene size up, scene safety, hazmat, ambulances, radios, all the fun, interesting stuff. So basically, the idea is to make the information presented in the standard EMT course to be understandable. A lot of people going into EMT school don't make it through just because they don't know what to expect, and it's either not something that they're interested in doing once they find out more about it, or two, they can't handle the reality of the job because it's a very stressful job. It's a fun job. Sometimes it's incredibly stressful, and then sometimes where you'd be bored out of your mind. My personal feeling is when you can get through a full shift, whether it be a 24-hour shift, a 2-day shift, whatever shift, with 0 calls, that's the perfect shift. Because that means nobody needed your help. And just by all are saying, if nobody needed 911, then no one's hurt or sick or whatever. So that's a good thing. A lot of brand new EMTs coming out of school, they want to get to the busiest area, work on the busiest nights, the Friday, Saturday nights, the high crime, high drug, high alcohol, high crash, like the big traumas and the exciting stuff, and they don't want to be dealing with the little old lady who's lonely and just needs someone to talk to, which is part of your job. You have cases that will be extremely routine, where you basically pick them up, you take them from wherever they're at, their home, place of business, somewhere in public, to the hospital. And most of the calls, I would say probably 80% of the calls are not emergencies. But there are that 20% that are genuine emergencies, and every second counts. You'll see a lot, you call them frequent flyers, that have the same kind of complaints, general non-specific complaints. And they might have something going on, or they might just be lonely, and it happens especially in the elderly. You'll see certain people will call all the time with some complaint just so they have someone to come talk to them. So those kind of things, that's part of the job. And then you got your extremely stressful situations, like what just happened recently up in Maine, for example. So the job can go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in the blink of an eye. But like I said before, if you can get through your shift with no calls, that's a good shift. So let's kind of talk about my background. I got my EMT basic in 1997. At that time, AEDs weren't real prevalent. I mean, they were on the market and they were available, but they were very expensive. And like today, you see them all over the place, but they didn't exist. So they had a separate training course that wasn't part of the main EMT program. It was optional class, like I think it was an extra day, which taught you how to use the AED, the automated external defibrillator, which is used in your cardiac arrest cases. And so you took this extra class and you took a little short written test and on a practical demonstration, and you got what's called EMTB/D, which stood for defibrillation. So you were trained and certified how to use the AED. Now, obviously, defibrillators have been around for a long, long time, but they weren't a EMT basic skill. EMT basics were CPR until paramedics show up, or you get them to the hospital, one or the other. But with the advent of the AEDs on the market and more people being trained, and of course, the more manufacturers make them, prices go down, they become more available. Now you'll see them just all over the place. I mean, even driving down the highway, you'll see a sign that says AED here, at like a church or a gas station or whatever. You'll see them all the time. So that's a good thing. And I don't know what the statistics are with bringing, saving someone that's had a sudden cardiac arrest back, or or not being there, what the outcomes would be. I don't have the statistics on that, but I gotta assume that it's better than the way it used to be. So I worked as a volunteer firefighter EMT in a county that had paid paramedics, but there was only 6 paramedic units that covered the entire county. And I don't know the square miles, but it was a very, very large county. And our primary responsibility was crash rescue firefighting, and then we had BLS, which is basic life support ambulances, that we would use. And the problem when you're doing this volunteer first responder thing is you don't always have enough people. You usually need 2 people to cover an ambulance, and then you still need people to cover the crash rescue side. So our primary duties was the crash rescue side. And if we had enough people, then we could get the BLS ambulance rolling. And normally you get dispatched at the same time as the paramedics. Depending on where the incident was, usually the paramedics either beat you there or were within a few minutes of your arrival. So it wasn't a big deal. You had them right there. And I worked there. I was still in the military at the time. I joined in 1996 or 7, all the way through 1999. And then when I was discharged from the military, I moved home, and I didn't work as an EMT. I was working in a totally different industry. And then, it's like people say like the clergy is like a calling. EMS, fire department, police, they're callings. So I started to feel this urge to go back because I missed being an EMT. I missed helping people. I really enjoyed the job. So by this time, my certificate had expired. So what I wound up doing is having to go and retake the EMT basic class. Now, having the benefit of already being certified, I wasn't as lost as I was the first time I went through. Because the first time I went through, it was like getting bombarded with information, come right and left, and 2 classes a week, and then we had a couple of Saturday classes that were all day classes. Like we would do, vehicle extrication training. We would do like the first Saturday class was all CPR. So basically, you start at like 9 in the morning, and you go to like 3 in the afternoon, and that's where you go all your initial CPR training. And then on top of that, I didn't have the current knowledge, because medicine changes. Things they did back in the 60s, we look at now like they were barbarians. It doesn't make any sense to us now because we have advanced to a point where whatever they were doing then is irrelevant and obsolete. So I wasn't allowed by the state that I was living in to challenge the EMT exam, because what I requested when I signed up for the class and went to the first class, and of course usually they're just smaller classes, 20 people maybe at the most, and they usually have everyone introduce themselves and tell a little themselves, their background, and why they wanted to be an EMT. And I stood up and I said, well, here's my name. I was an EMT in another state for several years, and then moved, and then my certification expired. Now I'm retaking the class to be recertified. And at the end of that class, I had asked my instructor if they could check into me being able to challenge the state exam. And they checked into it. Like the next week, they came back and told me, like, because it's been such a long span of time, you won't be allowed to challenge. You'll have to take the whole course from beginning to end all over again, and then take the written exam and the practical exam. And I said, okay, that's fine. And she did say that there was an opportunity for me to be able to help the other students, like during class, like instead of like practicing whatever the skill is, like inserting an airway or something, then I could help the other students learn how to do it themselves, and kind of watch them and give them little pointers, and then doing patient assessments. I wouldn't. I mean, I still have to do it, but then a lot of times I would just play the patient, because I didn't really need to go through the motions of doing a patient assessment, 4 or 5 times in a class. I could just do it once, and at the same time I could help the other students learn how to do their either medical assessment, trauma assessments, whatever the scenario that you're presented was. So I took the test, passed it, no problem. So I think I got like and I got an A, but I think on the final exam, I think I missed one question, and I challenged it, but I didn't get that point. But it doesn't matter. That's neither here nor there. And then, so I wasn't, at that time, I wasn't working for a 911 provider. I was working for a private ambulance service, and primarily what we did there is transport patients that couldn't go by any other means. So they couldn't go by personal vehicle. They couldn't go by like a medical cab, because they have they're basically minivans, and they're a care cab is a company that does this, and there's a few others that's what they do, is transport patients like in a wheelchair or something. But we had to transport all of the patients that couldn't go any other means. I was also, while I was there, on the neonatal transport team. So as an EMT basic, you don't really deal with the patient at that point, because you're dealing with a flight nurse and a flight paramedic, or if it's a ground transport, you're dealing with a paramedic and a nurse. So my job was basically to be the driver. So a lot of times we would go to the hospital, or I'm sorry, to the airport, which was, I don't know, 5 miles from the main hospital with the major NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. So a lot of these infants that were coming in were tiny. I mean, they were, little bitty things. I mean, the smallest baby I saw was less than a pound, and it was, I think at the time, 3 months premature. I could be wrong, but it was very premature. So a lot of those times, my job was to be a driver to get that patient, that infant, to the hospital to get further treatment, because they're coming in by airplane, like a medical transport airplane. I mean, the helicopters will go straight to the hospital, but they didn't obviously have a runway for they're like either Learjets or larger twin-engine airplanes that would transport the infants, usually from some small outlying community that didn't have the means to care for that child, and also because of the distance it would take to go by ground. It would take 4, 5, 6 hours to go by ground ambulance, so they would come by airplane. So that was part of my thing, and I was also, while I was there, I did a bunch of medical standbys where we'd go to events like a marathon, rodeos, anything that could potentially result in major injury, the fair, high school football games. We do that a lot. we would go and be there for medical standby. That way, us being there wouldn't tie up local 911. It would, because we were already there, so we could handle, like if someone were to be injured at a football game, for example, we would be there to treat that patient. After doing that for a few years, I decided to move to another state. And what I wound up doing is moving to a state that didn't accept the EMT license from the state that I was coming from. They wouldn't give you what's called reciprocity. So they wanted me to go through their EMT basic class again for a third time, which I thought was ridiculous. I said, look, my license is valid. It's all my continuing education credits are up to date. Everything is good. All I need to do is just get the state EMT license. I'll challenge the exam if you'd like, but I really don't think I need to go to the class. And the state basically said, no, you either go to the class or your license is not valid in this state. And I said, okay. So I left the EMS field for a while, and of course you get that call that says come back. And so I eventually gave in, and then I went and retook the EMT basic class for a third time, which I was really disappointed in that program because all the instructor did was read PowerPoints. I mean, I could read the stupid PowerPoint on the screen. I don't need this person to read each word in line, and then change the slide next. And I kind of talked to her about it. I said, why focus so much on the slides? Why not just use the slides as a kind of a primer or primer, and then discuss whatever the topic is in words that make sense to the students. But when you just read, signs and symptoms of a stroke, blah 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 blah, next page, blah 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 blah, no explanation, no rationale, no what's happening with the patient, no, it's just reading the slide verbatim and then going to the next slide. I was so frustrated with. And a lot of my classmates were frustrated too. So I wound up tutoring a few kind of off to the side, saying, okay, here's what they're talking about when we're doing whatever this is. Okay? So I was, at that point, I graduated the class, passed the test, and they had changed the way the test is done. This is NREMT, which is the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians, which is a governing body that sets standards. And they changed the way they did the test. And the test, I can't remember how many questions. Is it 150 questions? I think it's a lot of questions. It's a long test. I mean, it covers everything you learn from day one to the last day. I mean, it covers everything. And then they have what you'll do the actual written test, and then you'll do the practical test. And usually stations, 6, 8 stations, whatever. So you'll have a station for vital signs, a station for medical assessment, a station for trauma assessments, a station for splinting an extremity, a station for using a traction splint, just basic, just stations. So you'll start at one station and you complete that station, and there's criteria that are listed on the sheet that they call them auto fails. So if you don't hit each auto fail, you fail that station. If you fail the station, you fail the practical exam. I mean, it's a pass or fail deal. You have to pass all however many stations there were. So I did that, passed all that, and then at that point I got a job working for a 911 provider, but it was a volunteer on call. So basically, the way that works is you would be either at home, and you would respond from home to the facility where we had the ambulance parked, and then there would be another person, usually that was scheduled to work with you. So the two of you would meet at the this point, our ambulance was parked at a hospital, which is a separate little garage for the ambulance. So you would meet your partner at the hospital, and then you would leave from the hospital to go to whatever the call was, which is it's good in a way. So you're not locked up in there all day long. You can run errands or whatever, but it causes a delay in care because it takes time for each person to get to the facility, get to the ambulance, and then get to the actual site of whatever the incident was. And I didn't live close enough to the hospital, so they had like on-duty rooms that I would use, and I would sleep in those on-duty rooms. And so I'd usually work a 24-hour shift. So I'd go in at, say, Saturday morning at like 7 in the morning, and I work until the following Saturday morning. And then someone else would be relieved. But you weren't paid unless you got a call. So you were just chilling at the hospital in like what I guess you'd call like a ready room, or just like a bunk room. They only had 2 beds. So you would just be volunteering, and if you get a call, you'd go respond to that call, and then from the time you're dispatched to the time you return to the hospital, you get paid for that call. And that's great. But you don't really make a lot of money when you're only getting paid for working, 2-3 hours. If you only get one call, it's, a 2-hour call, it's all you're getting paid. So eventually, I just left the field altogether. And that was in 2010 or 11. I can't remember exactly. So I'm not currently certified as an EMT. I have no plans to go back to EMT school to get recertified. But I just want to make this little video to help people, along their path. So pay it forward, if you will, just so people can, I want to take these abstract medical ideas, condense them into bite-sized little nuggets that make sense to understand for the general person. And I need to say this disclaimer: nothing of what I'm going to say in any of these videos should be considered actual EMT education. This is just for information and entertainment, and is no substitute for actual EMT instruction from a licensed EMT instructor at a licensed provider to provide EMT instruction. So I hope this stuff that I cover in here is helpful, and I will cover every principle that you will learn from day one to the last day, and in a way that I hope makes sense and is easy to understand and digest. The whole purpose of this is just to be helpful. And you can always reach out to me in the comments if something is not clear. We will not be covering skills on any of these videos because I don't have the equipment to be able to demonstrate how to C-spine precautions a patient. I don't have a gurney to show you how a gurney operates. I don't have an AED or a cardiac defibrillator. I don't have the equipment. So basically, I'm going to cover what you consider the book skills, but not the hands-on skills. I'll try to describe some of the things, but I don't have the ability to discuss. I may at some point have some friends play patients, and I might do a couple of like mock patient assessments. So generally what I'll probably wind up doing is giving them like a series of symptoms and whatever condition, and then I'll have them play the part of the patient, and then I'll record that. That way you can kind of see kind of the process from A to Z on how to do a patient assessment. Those kind of things I can do, but if we're going to talk about, applying a Kendrick extrication device, for example, or a traction splint, I just don't have the equipment. So I hope you get something out of this. Thank you for watching. The next episode will be medical, legal, ethical requirements of the EMT Basic. Thanks for watching.
911, what's your emergency?